I send stuff back and forth, and there you go. Okay. So now we go to the final thing of tonight, and then we'll open up to more chat if people want to talk about it, and that is basically our open discussion about obviously one of the brands that we have looked at here in the eVTOL world. That is Volocopter. Once again, Corey had his eye on something, and when he did, he said, "Hey, by the way, this thing flew," and I was like, "Get out of town." He's like, "No, they took it to Oshkosh and they flew it," and I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it actually went up," and I was like, "Is there a video?" Sure as heck, there's a video from Oshkosh, and you can actually go to Volocopter's site and you can download the video, which is fantastic. That's nice of them to promote that for themselves. And so, without further ado, and turn up your volume because this thing's a little difficult to hear. But here is the Volocopter in its premiere shot at flying. So let's see. Like the stream. I think Lilium is better. We know you do, but here's the funny part. We're trying to diagnose some things here, Corey. So why don't you give me off the top of your head what you saw when this thing was flying?
Yeah. So, yeah, this is for just 2 days ago. It flew at Oshkosh. I think they said it was a 14-minute flight or 18-minute flight. Yeah, 4-minute flight. Pardon me, 4-minute flight at 18 miles per hour max speed. So they're over at Oshkosh. They're flying at the airfield. There's an air show there. If you're not familiar with Oshkosh, there's a bunch of things going on there right now, and they took their device there. They've got looks like a factory test pod in there. They flew it under an experimental type certificate, and you can see the guys just flying it around. Looks like they certainly got fly-by-wire in the center of the aircraft there. One thing I did ask Mike too while I was watching was, I wonder what his left hand is doing. If it has some kind of collective or some other device, some other interface he's using over there, but it doesn't appear that's the case. So it was just something that it kind of struck me too. And as we get a bit closer through the video and he's getting towards the end, I'll point something out. But right now, as you're seeing him fly around, if you look at the multifunction display in the middle, that liquid crystal display in the middle, it's got standard kind of instruments on it.
I froze it.
HSI, things like that. But later, it appears to me that as he's coming to a hover here closer to the end of the video, it looks like you get a really big display that takes up most of that display that looks like temperature. And at first, Mike and I were just kind of speculating if it was maybe bearing or something else. Right. But then, for various reasons, it looks like as he's getting a bit closer to the ground and he's not changing his heading, and he's been hovering there a longer amount of time, the temperature, it looks like a temperature, it just continues to increase. So I'm wondering if it's like battery temperature, or if you're familiar with first limiter displays like in aircraft where you have multiple things you need to keep track of, but the avionics will tell you what's getting closest to its limit first. Right. I don't know, but it just looks like they're really being quite conscious of temperature of something.
Well, I mean, it's low speed flight, so they can't be getting much cooling over whatever they think should be cooling. Number one,
exactly.
Okay, number two,
I guess that was.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. No, I guess that was just as we're seeing something like this fly, and now it's something that appears to be the case. Okay, temperature. That is another question to keep in mind when you run this many electrical components, this many electrical motors through one pack or whatever, how many packs they have in here. They do have to cool that pack somehow, and it's going to get warm, especially if they're just a hover there. So that's another thing we haven't talked much about on the channel was
resistance. Once you start beating this there in resistance, it's going to fight back, and that's going to come back as heat in your motors. And unless you have another motor or another fan in the back of your cooling segment, which most major aircraft do in their avionics holds, they do have cooling fans to keep the electronics cooler, right? But that's a lot more heat being generated by the direct resistance of whatever voltage regulators you have in there to generate different speeds for each rotor in order to maintain the stability in flight. So there's a lot going on in this component right now. And the other part of it is he gets this other part right about here where he goes into this hover, and I'm not sure if he's doing stability checks by raising the nose or pushing the nose left or right and just kind of saying, hey, this is what this vehicle can do. But you can see that his feet are crossed. But he also goes up momentarily and uses the trim on the top of the hi-hat. And I'm not really sure if that's some sort of alternate control that he's got going on. But, well, it does demonstrate that it's got stability. It also shows me that it's very much still like a helicopter in that the fact that it's not dynamically as stable as one would hope. It's probably more stable, but it looks like it still has some little movement there to the left and to the right, where the aircraft is actually responding to the wind around it, which was quite interesting, I thought. So just a couple of things to note there. But look, they have a different design scheme, right? They're going with what they think is worthwhile and their investment. But now we got to talk about the real world logistics of, is this thing still ready for prime time, right? Is it ready for prime time? Obviously not yet. I don't think so.
I don't know. I'm not sure. This, as the title says in the article, it's the first public crewed test that has been done. So we don't know what they've been doing on their own, of course. And the metrics of the flight: 18 miles per hour max top speed, 164 feet. I guess that's AGL. Maybe, I'm not quite sure. They didn't say, but anyway. And 4-minute flight. That doesn't show us a whole lot. It's similar to what we talked about in our last video yesterday, where we were just curious. I think it was Joby's doing their 150 mile flight, and it was interesting. It was certainly a milestone. Don't get me wrong, definitely something to see. But as a pilot, I just am curious on all the other factors that took place. Again, how hot was the day? Again, what was the max takeoff weight? How much payload was on board versus what they designed to have the payload on board? Right. When the flight took place and then ended, what was the battery consumption? Was it on par with what they expect? Does it lend itself to meet its endurance specification, design specifications, just stuff like that? That's how kind of I see this stuff and I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'd like to know more. That's just kind of how I think about it. So I'm gonna say certainly, good job here to have it in such a public venue as AirVenture, to have a successful thing to go, right. Have it go successfully, because it is one of those where if this hadn't gone successful, it would have been, of course, not good for anybody, the pilot and whatnot, but still it would be a major blow to eVTOLs, and then of course Volocopter as well. So it's still good, still a clap for them, right? It's good, but I'd just like to know more. That's just, yeah.
Gotcha.